fact, the exact opposite happened. The first 3 delegations crisscrossed the country, and in every place they were met by mobs, hordes of people who came out by the tens of thousands, weeping hysterically, literally tearing the clothes off the delegates' backs, begging, pleading with them to tell the Dalai Lama of their suffering under 25 years of Chinese occupation. Very heartbreaking, very upsetting, very, very profoundly shocking to the Tibetans in exile to see the impoverished people that came out in each town and city. And eventually the situation got so out of control that the Chinese killed the delegation diplomacy, period, and prohibited further delegations from visiting Tibet.
Compelled to turn to the outside world for support, the Dalai Lama journeyed abroad, giving Buddhist teachings and speaking out on behalf of his people. His inspiring messages attracted the attention of influential writers, scientists, artists, and politicians worldwide.
As a Buddhist practitioner, the most important practice is practice of compassion and love. Compassion means they not only concern about that person, but also you have some kind of sense of responsibility and sense of commitment. That is the genuine compassion. So now, in order to develop compassion, the most severe obstacle for that is hatred. So in order to reduce hatred, patience is the main antidote. The enemy or the people or the person who creates trouble for you is, from one aspect, as the best teacher.
The Dalai Lama, he astounds people in international forums when he verbally and vigorously denounces the genocide by the Chinese in Tibet, and in the same breath he says, "But I do not hate the Chinese. I feel sorry for those who are committing acts of violence as ordered by their superiors or as stimulated in it by being caught within a sort of emotional sea of a riot or a violent situation. They become completely dehumanized. I feel sorry for them."
In 1987, the Dalai Lama was invited by members of the United States Congress to address the Human Rights Caucus. He presented a 5-point peace plan for Tibet.
The future Tibet must be a zone of peace. In the past, Tibet acted as a buffer state. So since the Chinese invasion, since the Chinese stationed a lot of Chinese soldier army in Tibet, then the situation on that continent completely changed. So in future, Tibet is created as a demilitarized a zone of peace and can be tremendous benefit for all those states there.
He said that Tibet would consider having some sort of autonomous status under the purview of the People's Republic of China. China could retain the portfolios of defense and foreign affairs, but the Tibetans required internal autonomy.
He's talking about autonomy, not independence. That is a major concession. He's talking about Tibet controlling its own domestic life. He's not talking about military or foreign affairs issues, which could be left to the Chinese.
The Chinese government is firmly opposed to his visits to other countries and giving speeches distorting the history and the current situation in Tibet, and advocating the independence of Tibet. So it is totally unacceptable to the Chinese government for officials of any country to meet him in any form.
According to the Indian government, there are approximately 300,000 troops stationed in Tibet, enforcing the Chinese occupation.
Tibet separates the 2 most populous nations on the planet, China and India. These nations are nuclear, they're impoverished, they represent between them almost half the human race. If you have them faced off, as they have been since the Chinese invasion of Tibet, you've pulled the linchpin of peace at the heart of Asia.
Whoever controls Tibet dominates the rest of Asia. You've got all the periphery countries, China, Burma, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. At the center of all this is Tibet. And this is why I'm so attracted to the proposal of His Holiness to have a peace zone.
The Dalai Lama, as a world leader, offers a different perspective on world events, on national decisions, a perspective that values nonviolence, a perspective that does not consider military solutions to be effective.
It is due to the Dalai Lama's leadership that Tibetans have not resorted to the kinds of terrorism which have become common in other parts of the world.
The non-violent method is the firstly human way, and secondly, this method, while achieving our own goal, there will not be any side effect on the masses of Chinese. And though it may take time, so we need more determination, more willpower, or patience also.
In 1989, the Dalai Lama's efforts to lead a nonviolent struggle for justice for the Tibetan people earned him one of the world's most distinguished honors, the Nobel Peace Prize.
I accept it on behalf of the 6 million Tibetan people, my brave countrymen and women inside Tibet, who have suffered and continue to suffer so much. Ours has been a long struggle. We know our cause is just, because violence can only breed more violence and suffering. Our struggle must remain non-violent and free of hatred.
We have to understand in the Western terms what His Holiness is to Tibetans. Imagine what a Christian community would be like if the concept of their community was not that their Savior had been sacrificed long ago and would someday come back in some vague future, but that their Savior was right there, continuously reincarnated with them and sort of watching over them attentively and also requiring from them a positive response at all times. Imagine how that would change the quality of life, the sense of the immediacy of their religious ideals and the presence of their religious energies. It would affect people very strongly.
When His Holiness was awarded the Nobel Prize, there was no end to our happiness. We realized there was a market for peace and nonviolent struggle. We were optimistic that truth would prevail, and peace and justice would come to the Tibetans.
In Tibet, celebration of the Dalai Lama's Nobel Prize was banned, and as denunciations against him intensified, so did demonstrations against Chinese rule.
That demonstration in the Jokang, we covered that area. We saw a lot of destruction by the Chinese soldiers, but we could not report what we saw and what we heard. We feel like we are prisoners. We have the freedom to move around, but our minds are imprisoned. Whenever there is unrest happening in Tibet, I really wish that I could report the news. But at the same time, I also saw that if we covered any of this, those pictures eventually became the evidence for the security forces to arrest people.
I was grabbed by 3 Chinese. As soon as we were put in the truck, we were beaten. They used the butts of the rifles and tied our hands behind us.
We were not only beaten, we were made to take off all of our clothes and lay face down on the cement floor.
They said, "You are dirty," so they put on gloves and face masks. And then they told us we were prostitutes who chased after monks.
I didn't know if it was day or night. I was confused. They beat us until we were like corpses.
When they stuck the electric cattle prod in my vagina, Something happened in my heart, and then I fell unconscious.
The torture methods they use are truly inconceivable, beyond your imagination.